He was bleeding to death beneath a frozen sky when her children found him. A stranger dressed like wealth, but broken like war. The widow didn't want to save him. Men like him always carried ghosts, and she had buried enough already. But one choice in the cold would crack open a past she couldn't ignore, and set in motion a storm that would change all their lives forever. The wind clawed at the roof like a starving coyote. Shutters thumped the walls in nervous rhythm, and inside the one-room cabin, the widow stitched a torn shirt by firelight, her needle catching silver in each pass. Her boy sat near her boots, cross-legged and quiet, reading from a worn Bible with the pages half gone. Across the room, his younger sister stacked buttons like treasure, talking to herself in whispers. Outside, the land stretched hollow and bruised, barren hills rolling under a sky swollen with storm. Autumn had died quick this year, leaving behind a bitter chill and bare cottonwoods groaning in the wind. The valley had once held a river, but now it was just a scar of cracked clay and forgotten bones. She heard it first, not a shout, not a scream, just a sound wrong enough to make her gut tighten. A thud in the distance, like meat hitting the earth. The door creaked open before she could speak. Her daughter stood there, cheeks red from wind, hair tangled, eyes wide. "Ma," the girl breathed. "There's a man, bleedin', down by the creek." The widow didn't move. She let the words hang, heavy and ice-bitten. Her boy looked up from the Bible, blinking. "You sure he's alive?" she asked. The girl nodded. "Barely." There was a pause. The fire popped. Then the widow stood, folding the shirt with a slow deliberation that said she wasn't rushing for any man. She grabbed her coat, the old oilskin one that still smelled of smoke and mule sweat, and strapped her revolver around her waist. Outside, the wind howled like it remembered war. They followed the girl's tracks past the barn, down the slope to the gully. That's where they found him. He lay twisted like a broken marionette, blood soaked into the clay beneath him. His horse, a roan with eyes too tired for panic, stood nearby, reins dragging, one hoof lifted, unsure. The man had been shot, twice, one through the shoulder, the other grazing his ribs. His coat, though stained dark, was rich in make. Black wool, silver buttons. His boots were the kind you didn't wear unless you'd never dug a grave yourself. The widow squatted beside him, studying his face like a riddle. Mid-40s, maybe. Beard flecked with gray. Dirt crusted in the wrinkles around his eyes. He mumbled something, just one word. Avery. She didn't know what that meant. Didn't care. She pressed her fingers to his throat. Pulse, weak, but there. Her daughter whispered, "We should help him." Her boy stared down at the stranger with a look like he was seeing a ghost. The widow didn't answer right away. Her jaw clenched. This was the kind of man that came with debt or death, usually both. She'd built a life on staying unnoticed. Bringing him back would put a crack in that quiet. But she looked at her daughter, barefoot in the frost, fists balled like seeds, and knew she couldn't say no. Not without teaching them the wrong kind of lesson. She hauled him into the wagon herself. His weight wasn't much, just meat and regret. Back in the cabin, they laid him by the stove, stripped his coat off. Bullet through and through, clean enough if not infected. She boiled water, found the last of the whiskey, and stitched him shut with the same thread she used on shirts. He didn't scream, just breathed through clenched teeth, eyelids fluttering like a moth on glass. The children watched from the doorway, silent now. Even the fire seemed quieter. That night, she sat beside his cot, revolver on her lap, staring at him like he might vanish if she blinked. Outside, the wind cried for something it had lost. Hours passed. He didn't wake. She studied his hands, scarred knuckles, calloused palms. A gold ring on one finger. Not a wedding band. Something older, heavier. Her own fingers itched just looking at it. The boy broke the silence. "Is he gonna die?" She didn't look up. "Not tonight." The girl asked, "Is he bad?" A longer pause this time. The widow tilted her head, studied the unconscious man's face. "Maybe." They went to bed, without more words. She stayed up, listening to the stove crackle and the wind shift. Sometime before dawn, he stirred. Eyes opened, slow and glassy. He tried to sit, failed. She didn't help him. Where am I?" he rasped. "You're in my house," she said, "bleeding all over my floor." He coughed, a wet, broken sound, and offered the shadow of a smile. "Then I reckon I owe you." "You reckon right." He blinked at the ceiling. "My horse. Alive." He sighed and let his head fall back. "Didn't think I'd make it." "You haven't yet." He smiled again, fainter this time. "You got a name?" She didn't answer. He nodded like he understood. "Fair." His breathing slowed again, slipping back toward sleep. Just before it took him, he murmured the name once more. Avery. The widow sat there long after he'd gone quiet again, revolver still across her lap. She didn't know what ghosts rode with this man or what kind of trouble his blood might invite. But she knew the land, and it whispered the way it always did before the storm. The fire hissed, and outside, snow began to fall, soft as breath, sharp as truth. The cowboy awoke to silence and the scent of boiled linen. Light filtered through the window in pale ribbons, and the warmth of a nearby stove soaked into his skin like sunlight on stone. He blinked slowly. The ceiling above him was rough-hewn pine, a roof built by hands that knew how to survive. He tried to rise, but pain barked through his side and shoulder, sharp and immediate. A low grunt escaped him. "I wouldn't." The widow's voice came from the far side of the room. She sat in a chair by the fire, polishing a small blade, her hands methodical. Her children were gone from sight, but he could hear them whispering behind a curtain strung across the cabin. He laid back against the cot, the wooden slats pressing into his spine. "Didn't mean to bleed all over your place." She didn't smile. "Lucky for you, I've cleaned worse." His eyes searched her face, trying to piece together something beneath the calm. "You patch up every half-dead man you find in the dirt." "No, just the ones my daughter drags home." He exhaled through his nose, almost a laugh. "Then I owe the girl my life. She's young. Doesn't know what men cost yet." The words hung, dry and honest. He didn't flinch at them, just nodded like a man who'd seen the price before. Outside, the wind had dulled. Snow still clung to the sill, melting slow under weak morning sun. Somewhere out in the hills, a hawk cried. He gestured toward the water basin. "Mind if I sit up? Throat feels like I swallowed gravel." She stood, handed him the tin cup without stepping too close. He drank in short gulps, careful not to spill. When he was done, he wiped his mouth with the back of his hand. "Name's Grady," he said quietly. She didn't answer. "You don't have to tell me yours. I'm not planning to stay long. Just till I can sit a horse." "You can sit one now. You'd fall off before the next mile." He chuckled. "Fair enough." The curtain rustled. The boy peeked out, silent, eyes wary. Grady met his gaze and nodded gently. The boy vanished again like a leaf pulled by wind. "You're good with them," the widow said, more a statement than a compliment. "I had a sister. Raised her after my ma passed. Never had kids of my own. Didn't want to." "You talk like a man with too much memory." He glanced down at his bandaged side. "Memory's all that's left sometimes." She studied him for a long beat. "Then, why were you out here? These hills don't take kindly to wanderers." He hesitated. His fingers twitched against the blanket. "I was headed west. Had a run-in with old partners. Bad blood, bad timing." She arched an eyebrow. "You steal something?" "Only thing worth taking from them was a clean conscience. And I barely managed that." He tried to smile again, but it didn't hold. The widow didn't press further. Silence stretched between them, companionable in its own way. Days passed. Grady healed slowly. He spent time in the chair by the fire, reading aloud when the children asked. His voice hoarse but warm, the words strange medicine for all of them. He carved little toys from scrap wood, a horse, a bird, a strange beast that the girl insisted was a lion. He was gentle with them, never condescending, never too familiar. Like he knew the edge they lived on and didn't want to make it steeper. Still, the widow watched him like a hawk might a snake, not sure if it was worth the strike. One morning, while gathering kindling behind the barn, he collapsed. She ran to him, found him half-conscious, one hand clutching his side. "Reopen the damn wound," he muttered. She helped him back inside, arm over her shoulders. His breath came ragged, shame thick in his eyes. "Don't try to prove anything," she said once he was on the cot again. He stared at the ceiling, jaw tight. "Spent most my life trying to prove I ain't what folks say I am. And what do they say? That I leave things worse than I find 'em." She didn't reply right away. Just stood there, coat unbuttoned, snow still melting in her hair. Then she reached out and tugged his shirt straight. Not gentle, but not cruel either. "You're here now. That's what matters." That night, the wind howled louder. Grady muttered in his sleep, names, places, fragments of stories, soaked in regret. The widow sat awake beside the stove, feeding the fire, not pretending she didn't hear. She caught a word in his sleep. Coal. The next day, while helping her patch a hole in the roof, she saw it. When he lifted his arm just enough, the hem of his shirt rode up. A brand on his side. Faded but clear. Burned long ago. A curved snake around a cross. She knew it. A mark of the Black Hollow Gang. She froze, hammer in hand, breath held like a prayer too heavy to speak. When he noticed her stare, he stiffened, lowered his arm. Said nothing. She climbed down without a word. Later, he approached her by the barn. "You saw it." "I saw it. I ain't proud of it. Ain't running from it either." "You rode with them?" "Long time back. Wasn't the man I am now." She folded her arms. "Men always say that when the law's behind them." "There ain't no law after me," he said. "Just men worse than I ever was." He met her eyes then, and for the first time, she didn't look away. "You could have left me to die," he said. "Would have been safer. I still might." He smiled, but it was sad. "I won't lie about who I was. But I'm trying to be someone else now." "Why?" "Because someone's got to." She didn't answer, just turned back toward the house, voice low. "You can stay. For now. But you keep your past outside my door." "I will." He meant it. She believed that much. Inside, her son watched from the window. The girl sat on the floor, carving a toy from the wood Grady had left her. Outside, the sky bruised darker. A hush fell over the valley, as if the land itself was listening. The wind shifted. Far in the distance, beyond the ridge, the sound of horses echoed faintly. Not one, several. Grady turned his head slightly, as though he felt them before he heard them. The widow noticed. She said nothing, but her fingers closed around the revolver hanging near the door. Snow fell in thick, quiet drifts by morning, softening the world into a hush. The land wore white like a funeral veil. Inside the cabin, the fire crackled steady, but the air carried a tension that could not be warmed. Grady moved slowly now, not because of pain, but purpose. He checked the windows twice before he sat, fingers restless. His eyes drifted off into the hills beyond the tree-line, as if expecting the wind to bring shadows with it. The widow noticed. She said nothing. The children picked up on it too. The boy no longer asked Grady to teach him the names of stars. The girl no longer left her carved lion near his cot. The silence wasn't cruel. It was survival learning how to speak. That afternoon, the riders came. 3 men. Well-dressed, well-armed. Boots polished, hats untouched by honest labor. They rode in like they already owned the land, easy, slow, with too much confidence. The widow stood on the porch when they arrived, rifle across her arms. Grady remained inside, unseen but listening. One of the riders tipped his hat. "Ma'am," he said, smile thin as a knife's edge. "Hate to trouble you in this weather." "Then don't." That smile twitched wider. "We're looking for a man. Got himself turned around out here a few weeks back. Might be wounded. Might be dangerous. I've seen no such man." The second rider, shorter, with a scar puckered across his neck, let his gaze wander toward the windows. "Place looks warm. You sure you ain't hiding a friend?" "I don't keep friends," she replied. "And I sure as hell don't hide them." The third man, tall, quiet, younger, said nothing, but dropped something into the snow before turning his horse. A silver coin. It sank halfway into the drift, shining like a buried warning. The lead man tipped his hat again. "If you do happen to see someone, let him know his old partners are real anxious to speak." They left without another word. Their hoofbeats faded slow, like thunder remembering where it came from. Inside, Grady stood by the stove, pale but steady. She shut the door behind her and didn't move. "Those men know you?" she asked. He nodded. "Used to ride with them. We buried something once. I went back. Took my share. And they want it back. They want blood first." Her fingers twitched around the rifle strap. "You lied to me." "No," he said quietly. "I didn't tell you everything. That's not the same." She stepped closer. "It is when it puts my children in their sights." Grady looked down, ashamed but not surprised. "I didn't come here to hide. I didn't mean to stay. But your kids, they looked at me like I was worth something again. I hadn't felt that in years." "They don't know what you are." "They know enough," he said. "They know what I'm trying to be." For a long time, the only sound was the fire. The girl peeked from behind the curtain, eyes wide. The boy stood behind her, lips pressed tight. The widow turned, looked at them, then back at Grady. "You say you're trying," she said. "Then prove it." He blinked. "How? You want to fix something? Stand and fight. Not for yourself. For them." She didn't wait for a reply. She walked past him, pulled open a drawer, and dropped a handful of bullets on the table. "We've got 1 day. Maybe 2. Grady stared at the rounds, then at her. "You sure?" She met his gaze. "You brought hell to my door. I'll be damned if I let it take root." That night, they prepared. Grady limped through the barn, checking nails, hammering planks against the broken boards. The boy helped, wordless but determined. He handed Grady tools, held the lantern, watched every move. Inside, the widow set the traps, tin cans with rocks, fishing line across the porch, the shotgun resting behind the woodpile. She taught her daughter how to light the oil lamp fast, how to hide in the crawl space with her brother. When the fire finally burned low, they sat in silence. Grady broke it first. "You ever lose someone to violence?" The widow stared at the flame. "My husband died slow. Disease took him. I buried him with my bare hands and a prayer that didn't work." "I'm sorry." She shook her head. "I wish it had been quicker. Easier to hate something with a face." Grady said nothing. His eyes shimmered for just a moment, then cleared. "My brother," he said, voice low. "He followed me into that life. Wanted to be like me. Didn't make it out." The widow looked over. "That why you walked away? That's why I can't stop walking." There was something in that truth, ragged, unfinished, that settled between them like snow on old fence posts. Not forgiveness, but recognition. The next morning, the sky was clear. Crisp blue, clouds cut like paper edges. They finished boarding the windows, loaded the rifles, laid out the shells in rows along the table. The girl tied a ribbon in her lion's mane. The boy sharpened a stick like a spear. When the sun fell behind the ridge, they stood together in the fading light, for figures against the coming dark. Grady took the boy aside, handed him a small revolver, the grip worn smooth. "You don't shoot unless there's no other choice," he said. "But if it comes, you don't flinch." The boy nodded, solemn. Then Grady turned to the widow. "They'll come with the moon." "I know." He looked out at the horizon, where night was already bleeding in. "I'll buy time," he said. "You get the kids out if it goes bad." "We don't run," she said. "Not anymore." He smiled crooked. "That's what I was afraid of." The wind picked up again, dry and biting. Inside the cabin, the oil lamp flickered. Shadows danced on the walls. Every breath sounded loud. And far, far off, just over the ridge, a coyote howled. They didn't speak again. There was no need. The moon rose red as rust, heavy over the ridge. It bathed the land in a blood-tinged light, soft enough to lie, but sharp enough to wound. The cabin sat still in the frost, windows darkened, the smoke from the chimney swallowed by the night. Inside, time slowed. Grady stood by the door, rifle in hand, the widow just behind him, her breath steady but tight. The children lay silent in the crawl space beneath the floorboards, wrapped in blankets, the girl clutching her wooden lion like it was armor. The riders came at midnight, 3 silhouettes on horseback, gliding through snow like phantoms. They didn't rush, didn't need to. Predators rarely do. Grady watched from the slats in the window, his heart beating not with fear, but clarity. He'd run from this moment for years. He wasn't running anymore. The men dismounted. Boots crunched over frozen ground. The leader, the one with the nice smile, walked up the path like he was coming to collect a debt already paid. Grady stepped outside. No words. Just the sound of wind brushing snowdrifts, the click of his boots on the porch, the creak of old wood underweight. You always did know how to pick your hiding holes, the leader said. Grady didn't answer. You got something belongs to us. I took what was owed, Grady replied, voice flat. The second man stepped forward, hand on his revolver. You took more than silver. You took coal. Grady's jaw tightened. I buried coal. Because neither of you would. That hung in the air, sharp as broken glass. The wind dropped. The world leaned in. You ready to die for that? Grady glanced back at the cabin, where the window flickered with firelight. No, he said. But I'm ready to make sure you don't touch them. The first shot came sudden, a burst from the tall one in the back. It shattered the porch railing near Grady's shoulder. He rolled off the edge, landing hard in the snow, and returned fire. The shot cracked like a split tree, catching the tall man high in the thigh. He screamed, dropped. The cabin door flung open. The widow stepped out, rifle raised, eyes cold as the frost. She fired once, clean, fast, and the second man spun sideways, his gun tumbling into the drift. He lay still. The leader ducked behind the water trough, grinning through his teeth. Well, I'll be damned, he muttered. You found yourself a little army. Grady moved through the snow like he'd lived in it. Ducking low, he circled wide, rifle ready. Every breath hurt. Every heartbeat echoed in his shoulder wound. But he didn't stop. The leader fired blindly toward the cabin. A bullet struck the doorframe. Splinters flew. Inside, the girl flinched beneath the floorboards. The boy held her hand tighter. Grady found his angle and moved fast. Rose behind the leader's flank. Drop it, he growled. The man spun. Too late. Grady fired. The shot hit him square in the chest. He staggered, coughed, fell to one knee. I tried to make it right, Grady said, stepping closer. The man smiled, blood on his teeth. Right don't matter out here. One last twitch of his hand. A pistol hidden in his coat. The shot rang out before Grady could move. He staggered, dropped to both knees. The world tilted. The widow fired once more, straight through the leader's temple. He dropped without sound. Then silence. Real, deep final. She ran to Grady, catching him before he hit the snow completely. His shirt bloomed red beneath her hands. Don't you quit, she said, breath ragged. He smiled small. I ain't running, remember? You don't get to die now. His eyes flicked toward the stars. They're safe, right? Yes. He nodded, weak. Then I did something good. She pressed her hand to his wound, blood soaking her palm. You did more than that. He coughed once. Never thought I'd find peace in a place like this. You found home, she said softly. Grady's breath slowed, then stopped. She didn't cry. Not right away. She laid him down, closed his eyes, and sat there a while, the snow falling gently around them, the wind finally still. In the morning, the children helped bury him behind the cabin, beneath a stand of frostbitten pines. The boy carried the shovel. The girl placed the lion at the base of the wooden cross they carved. The widow said no words, just stood with one hand on the boy's shoulder, the other on her daughter's head, her eyes dry and far away. Spring came slow that year. When it did, it came with green shoots, soft rains, and the sound of laughter from the barn. The boy learned to work the plow. The girl learned to braid a horse's mane. The cabin stood whole. One evening, the widow sat on the porch, watching the sun sink low. A carved sign hung on the fence now, simple, clean. Home. Behind her, the fire burned soft. Inside, on a shelf, lay Grady's worn revolver and a letter he'd never finished. The boy had found it tucked in the saddlebag. It read, If I don't make it, bury me near something good. Somewhere I wasn't just another mistake. She had. And he wasn't. Out on the ridge, where the snow once whispered of death, the wind now carried something lighter, something almost like peace.